if we start saying that actions of the state of Israel are the action of Judaism, I think that will be an overstatement.
College protests at UW, and we talked to a bunch of people who were like, yeah, the solution is to just eliminate Israel, right? Never having been there, right? Most of them never met a Palestinian, right? Or a Jew, it's crazy that there's this kind of toxicity.
Christians, if this goes forward, should be doing everything they can to try and invest in the future of peace in the region. That could mean investing in businesses. It could mean making friends.
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome to Christ and Caliphate. On this podcast, we talk through modern events in the Muslim world through a Christian lens, and we talk about timeless principles as they relate to the Christian and Muslim worldview. Today, we are going to be talking about Sisi's Gaza plan. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Trump's crazy plan to annex all of Gaza and turn it into like Middle Eastern Las Vegas. And now the situation has developed, and now Sisi is talking about an Arab-led plan to transform the Gaza Strip. How much have you guys tracked with that?
I read up on it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we are staying in touch as we are globally connected, right? So every news, any development, particularly, it's the social media that gives you most of the reports. And yes, I am pretty much, I won't say I know everything about what's the progress going on, but I think pretty much on top of what's leading and what's not leading,
So a lot of people were saying ahead of this, the reason Trump came out with his crazy Gaza plan in that video, which showed a golden statue of him outside of a giant hotel in Gaza, is because he was trying to bait the Arab world into creating their own constructive plan for Gaza. And it kind of seems like that theory is vindicated now.
There's a lot of like talk whenever Trump does anything, particularly internationally. Like last week we had the Zelensky fallout that, people are saying like Trump is playing 4D chess and the rest of the world is playing 2D, right? So that may be the case. It's, part of me just wants to go to the Gaza Riviera and sing Copacabana or something like that. But I think we all know that that's a plan that won't work. So this plan is a little bit, I don't know if it's more grounded in reality, because I'm not sure how it actually deals with Hamas. Like everything I was reading just kind of was like jumping around the issue of, the PLO will be involved, and there will be, a group of technocrats who will be overseeing this thing, like essentially like a committee, leadership by committee or whatever. First of all, doesn't work. Not in the Middle East anyway.
Her name is Layla. She was a showgirl with a kafaya in her hair and a hijab down to there.
Did you do that?
She'd do the dabka and do the cha-cha.
Did you do that like right on the spot?
Yeah.
My man, that was... You got a gift.
I don't know what you guys talking about.
It's Copacabana, man. Come on.
Well, Layla tried to be a star. Tamir always tended bar.
Oh my
Yeah, I think there is another aspect which is more serious and which I think need more attention. First of all, I think Trump's followers are just ignoring some ground facts and just going with, oh, what a magnificent leader he is. Every single move he makes is a deal. But this is not reality. You know, his some of his moves are aggressive, and that leads to the process where a lot of world leaders think that this crazy man can do anything, right? So better not leave things on him completely. Better stand up. So yeah, this is one point. Another point, I think when this Arab League come up with a plan for Gaza, I think there is a trust issue. This is not happening. Do you think? I mean, like, I ask any person in here that how can you allow Arabs, right, to rebuild Gaza when you know that this could really enforce Hamas, make it more powerful, right? So there is definite trust issue. How are you going to address those problems? First of all, that is the question on the table. If you get over that, yes, I can see that Arab League is coming into play. If not,
Yeah.
I don't think this
First reaction totally was like, yeah, the Arab League. They're so effective in all of the things that they've ever undertaken, right? Like the Arab states show so much solidarity, right? Like, you have a group of people who are, they come together, and I don't want to say their intentions are bad. Maybe their intentions are good, but I can't point to one thing in the past like 30 or 40 years that I look at and go, you know what? Thank God the Arab League did that, right? Like, thank God the Arab League took the lead in this or that.
So what I can say here is that, say what you want about Saudi and the UAE, they actually know how to build things. And that's at least a plus.
That's true.
In this side of things.
Yeah, there is money.
That's true.
There is money.
There's money, and there's also construction.
And also willingness.
Right.
There is a willingness.
And competence.
Competence, again, the point here is trust.
Yes.
How you gonna win trust of Israel, on top of that, of United States? Okay, maybe you can convince United States, but more central player here, it is Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, this right group people rule Israel, or like govern Israel. So for them, accepting Arabs as people coming and constructing Gaza has to.
I mean, they might
dimensions.
not have much of a choice in the end. I kind of look at it like there are three plans on the table, and the first one that was proposed was the Trump plan, and then the second plan is this plan, right? So I'm not necessarily going in order in chronology. I'm just going in order of like maybe viability. But then I would switch, right? Like Trump plan, put that second. And then the third plan, which no one will want, is Israel reabsorbs Gaza and starts doing like a path to citizenship for Palestinians. So they get voting rights, they get passports, they get the whole thing. And then instead of 1.6 million Arabs that are already living in Israel, you have, I think there's like 1 point to, I can't.
About 2 million people.
About 2 million. So now you have a minority in Israel of 4 million people.
But that's not what Israel wants.
I don't think Israel wants that. I don't think anyone actually wants that. Like the Palestinians don't want it. But in my mind, so back in the handover in 2005, there was discussion of this, right? Like if we go with the two-state solution, we stand the chance of being attacked because it was coming after the 2001 Intifada, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a whole bunch of like tension about actually handing it over, and we like accusations on both sides of nobody's negotiating in good faith or whatever, right? But Sharon did it. He just said it was going to happen, and it happened. So, you look at the plan. People back then were like, well, what if we just absorbed them? What if we just made them essentially Israelis? Like, Nas.
Nas Daily.
Yeah, Nas Daily. I mean, I watched his video, and he didn't actually come out and say that, but he gave those vibes on one of his video. Like, look, we can all live here. I'm Palestinian. I have an Israeli passport. We can all live here, and we can all like prosper together. I think the problem with that is Iran. Like, no matter what the solution the Arab League comes up with, is Iran is never going to be like malevolent. I'm sorry, but not malevolent. The other one,
Benevolent,
right? But Iran is never going to be benevolent. Iran has its stated goals, right? And there are groups that want those stated goals. So I think the problem and the barrier to peace is no matter who is in charge of reconstruction, right? You still have like a lot of people who live in Gaza right now who want to see the elimination of a Jewish state or Jews. And then on top of that, like, there's a lot of that sentiment around the world. Like, we went to that college protest at UW, and we talked to a bunch of people who were like, yeah, the solution is to just eliminate Israel, right? Never having been there, right? Most of them never met a Palestinian, right? Or a Jew. Like, it's crazy that there's this kind of toxicity, in the air around something, and there's so much like misinformation and secondhand information, and a lack of like willing to sit there and listen to things from both sides, right? Like, where the argument totally boils down to is, well, they attacked us and we're attacking them. And then I just said that, but that could really be anyone saying that. It could be Palestinian or Jew saying.
Yeah, I think there is one other thing that I think needs our attention, and that is two-state solution, right? But before going to two-state solution, I would explain why there is a difference between Jews and Israel as a country. And actions of Israel does not represent Judaism, right? That's what I actually believe, because Judaism is religion and Israel is a state. So if we start saying that actions of the state of Israel are the action of Judaism, I think that will be an overstatement.
I mean, you have to kind of look at it and say, is Judaism is a bunch of things, right? Like, Judaism is a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Jews are a people that exist regardless of the religion,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's weird because they exist because of their religion, right? So, the state of Israel is a secular state. It's founded as a secular state the entire time. It's run essentially as a socialist state. And it doesn't operate much differently than, say, France, right? Like, Ben-Gurion spent a bunch of time in France. So, when they're setting up the actual apparatus of the state, like, they're taking French principles of government and essentially using it to govern. So, I think the thing you have to keep in mind is, this is a very old joke, right? Like, two Jews, three opinions. You know what I mean? It's like two Jews, three opinions. One Jew will say this and the other Jew will say, well, it could be this way or it could be this way, right? And next thing you know, you have a whole country of people who are walking around and I have watched videos of people who were saying, like, before this, I was left-wing. I was completely left-wing. I wanted peace. We sang songs of peace. When I was a kid, they promised us peace. And then I'm 50 years old now. We don't have peace, right?
Yeah.
So after, what happened there, and the move by like October 7th, I think that it just, I mean, we've been on this show saying it, it changed everything, right?
I think my general sense of this current plan and the sort of milieu behind it is that this currently represents the best chance there is for lasting peace at this moment in time.
Sorry to interrupt you, James, but here is a thing. There is a very catchy thing here. Now, question would be, does Israel wants that or not? Because now Hamas is being dismantled. Right now, is Israel attention is, or intentions, I would say, is to create a two-state solution. Or Israel wants to take over all that place, including what they're doing in West Bank, that is illegal settlements, and we agreed, right? So I think the intentions matter here.
Yeah, the intentions do matter, but the mind of the crowd can move very, very quickly. So what you'll see is that you have some ideologies which are kind of always there. So Islamism is always there. The sort of settler, expansionist Jewish mentality is always there and always exists. And depending on
Radical Judaism is there too.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The sort of settler mentality, right? That's how I'm labeling that. Those are kind of there as constants, but the mood of the crowd will change dramatically based on external events. So after October 7th, Israel has become a great deal more cynical towards hope with the Arabs. But if you have a plausible way forward, that crowd can change very quickly as well. So what I'm saying here is there are lots of obstacles here. The trust is number one, of course. The continual operation of these ideologues is there as well. But the problem, but also an opportunity, is I think a lot of the politicians in this are cynical. I don't think the current government of Israel is majorly driven by idealism at this point. I don't think the Gulf states are driven by idealism, which means if you can demonstrate a way forward that makes everybody richer and more popular, that's the kind of thing that politicians love.
Yes, I 100% agree, but there is a catch in it. Even in Arab world, right? When we see Arab world, every single country in Arab, yes, they do not have an ideal situations to work through, but religion plays a big part in it. You know, their policies have to be aligned with religion, the religious ideology of that particular country. Is that not true with Israel?
No.
And I would even flip the question. Then what about Hamas? Like, as much as you could say that is, I'm just taking your statement. Like, as much as you could say that there are elements in Israel, right, that don't want peace. I mean, Hamas certainly does not want peace. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that Hamas is even a viable governing entity at this point, because they are not governing. They're just a terrorist organization, right? Like, they're not feeding their people. They're not holding elections. They're not doing anything like that, right? There's no policy. It's just let's operate like a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
So that's the flip side of the question, right? Like, to me, is I don't see, and this is why I think a plan from the outside is so important, right? You have two people essentially locked in a death match right now, right? And one militarily has at least the upper hand.
Yeah, big time, right?
Big time, right? So, and you're talking about a not very big area of land either. So if they really wanted to, I mean, forget about the euphemism, they could literally turn it into a parking lot, right? So I think when you look at, the two people and the two sides that are like wrapped in it, I don't see, particularly from Hamas, like, or, Hezbollah or Iran or anything, because the three of them are linked, right? You can't just say one is one, right? You can't say like Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran are, it's like a different kind of axis of evil,
Just
like
need links to further needs.
right. So they need each other
Right.
to further a common goal. So I don't really see like, I don't see like, a justification for peace at this moment. I mean, I wish I did, but like, I understand, let me just say, I understand the cynicism. And then the other part is, what if where is it coming from Hamas? And it's not. So I think this is why plans like this are so important, right? Like, even though I'm cynical about that too.
Here's where I want to land this segment. There are all sorts of obstacles to making this plan work, but I would say these are the best ingredients we currently have on the table. And Christians, if this goes forward, should be doing everything they can to try and invest in the future of peace in the region. And that could mean investing in businesses. It could
Yep.
mean making friends, because one key ingredient in the Bible is the command to love your enemy.
Yep.
And people ask us a lot of the time, what does that mean? One thing it certainly means is being able to envision a world where your current enemies can be your future friends. And in the Israeli and Palestinian cultures right now, there is not a lot of that. And so you need people with outside eyes, with a vision with everybody's best interest in mind, to be involved on the ground as possible. And there's no guarantee any of this is going to work, but it certainly won't work if everyone continues being cynical. It might work if people of good faith are prepared to actually jump in and be involved on the ground. One thing I've seen a lot of discussion of, both on X and in real life, is the rate at which Islam is growing. And a lot of Muslims online will kind of talk about this as almost like proof for the truth of Islam. What do you guys think about the numbers? Are the numbers accurate? Are they inaccurate? Like, what is really going on here?
I have to trust that the numbers are at least close to accurate, right? I was in Turkey one time, and I was having a conversation with a guy who owned a shop, and he had a fabric shop, and he was a devout Muslim. His wife was hijab. She wore hijab, and at the time in Turkey, that was like not necessarily like as popular as it is now. And he was talking about how his mosque raised money to go to Africa and dig a well, right? And then they also raised money. The Turkish state would like also help pay for this, but they went to Africa, they dug a well, and then they planted a mosque there, and they left an imam, right? And the same thing happens in churches. I think the thing that would make, just on a practical level, outside of like deciphering whether or not something is true, because when you go to Africa, people are like, they're hungry for like resources. It really is. If you come with resources, they will listen to anything you say, right? And it's not fair, because they are looking for truth too, but they're also in great need, right? It's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, they need food, they need shelter, they need clothing, they need resources. But Christians in Africa, for instance, are persecuted. Who sits there and goes, I want to be part of the persecuted minority, right? Like, I want to be part of the group that everyone looks at mistrustfully. So I know, I understand that, right? But I've also heard it. And then on top of that, the thing that happens in places like Africa is it just becomes another part of a whole bunch of religions they have in their pockets. So it's really difficult, for instance, from a Christian standpoint, to go into Africa and you start discipling people, and it's like, well, it's a combination, right? It's a mixture of a whole bunch of different religions, but it's being called one thing. So I don't know if that's what's happening, but I know that the place where it's growing the fastest is in Africa. So I'm wondering what the efficacy of those numbers are, because, are they all actually like, devout Muslims who are following? I would highly doubt that. But I do think that they believe that they're Muslims. So then you have that, right?
Yeah, I think one major element when we talk about Africa is Christianity is side by side with Islam when it comes to conversions or converting rate. And why I say that, it goes back to your point where it is the game of resources,
Right.
right? The desperateness in society is one of the major elements. It doesn't matter whether it's Christian or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or whatever ism is there. If you bring food to my table, if you give me resources, money, I'm more than willing to do whatever you want me to do, right? That's one catch. Yes, the other point, if the religion there is Islam in majority, right, then Christians are persecuted there.
Sure.
Right? But again, this is the society mindset. Christians, on the other hand, where there are majority Christians, they are not also welcoming to Muslims. It's very, it's not to say that they are as bad as their counterparts, but there is a sense of hate in there towards each other. So that is the situation of Africa. But the more alarming sense, or the more concerning, is the rise of Islam in West.
So I think if you actually look at the rise of Islam in America specifically, a lot of it's hype, in that you have what you're using is sort of TikTok videos of like, look at this famous priest, Hilarion Higgy, or Sneeko, Andrew Tate, or like some like specific media personalities. Those people, absolutely exist. But if you actually look at the data, the Muslim population in America is stable. As many people join Islam each year as leave Islam each year, which means the Muslim population stays about the same in America. It isn't some massive movement which is taking in thousands by the day. It's like about 20,000 people convert to Islam in America each year. About 20,000 people in America leave Islam each year. It's a stable population. Now, you might find yourself in a place where you have lots of people converting to Islam in one place, and it feels like that. And the same can be said with Christianity as well. You might be in a place where you just see tons of people becoming Christians. That doesn't necessarily mean it's happening everywhere. You might just live in a kind of specific bubble of that.
I want to follow up with that question that asked. In Europe, particularly, Islam is one of the growing religion, and it's not about birth rate, it's about conversion rates. And I was trying to figure out what's the reason of that. And the reason is the shallowness of society, the absence of structure in society, the idea of liberalism, where you are truly and only responsible for yourself, and you are left alone in this world to deal with your problems, even if you're Christian. Well, I'm saying if you're Christian like you're culturally Christian, not in a Christian circle, right? That gives a sense of loneliness. That gives a sense of, I am on my own. I do not have nobody. And Islam comes with a complete package. Of course, you're just going on the surface. You do not know what's lurking underneath, right? You're just going with the surface, and on the surface, I can tell you, Islam looks so beautiful, so perfect. Right, and that is one of the reason, and that is one of the reason in here as well. That is one of the reason in Europe as well.
I mean, if we're talking about sheer numbers, I do believe that birth rate plays a role. I mean, particularly when you hear people talking about it. Sometimes you'll be like flipping through YouTube reels, and somebody will be like a Christian arguing with a Muslim on the street, and the Muslim will say, in 10 years we'll be the majority. And sure, conversion rate, I think it definitely plays a role. I think that it's a lot easier to have a kid every 2 years. Like, I can speak from experience, right? Like, I have 6 kids, we had twins twice.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, we're starting to make Mongolia great again. The point is, I think birth rate affects the numbers. If more so or as much as conversion rates. I mean, it has to, because in my mind, it's like, do you see people gathering in soccer stadiums and like converting to Islam in London or Brussels or Stockholm or wherever. I don't see that. I've never seen that. I've never seen these big gatherings where it's like, Christianity, they'll be like, we're selling, we're having a rally in an open thing, and the speaker will speak and 10,000 people will come forward or something. I'm not saying they all become Christians. I'm saying they come forward, right? But I've never seen that in an Islamic area. So maybe Islam's ground game is better.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think they think there's a good ground game, especially in Europe. And I think, Shadil, you're right, that Europe has kind of deleted its soul. It's secular and impersonal, and Islam and the Muslim community generally does a good job at a lot of the things Europe does a bad job out of, and it's using that to fill a spiritual void. Here's an interesting argument I would make. If you look at Europe and the West, the fastest growing religion will be Islam. If you look at the Muslim world, the fastest growing religion will be Christianity. So let's take Iran, for example. Since the Iranian Revolution, there's probably about 50,000 Christians in Iran. And now there are millions, like actually millions. And you can look at the data on this, but it is more than just data. You can actually go experience this. Basically, in almost every church in America, in England, in the West, in Europe, you can go and you'll find at least one Iranian family who is going to that church, because the amount of Iranians becoming Christians is massive.
Yep.
I've met 2 new Iranian Christians in the last month. And so the growth rate is enormous in Iran. And that's true in a lot of places across the Muslim world right now. So you've got Islam growing in Europe and Christianity growing in the Middle East. So you perhaps 100 years from now will have the Islamic states of Europe and the Christian states in the Middle East.
What I think is what we see in Europe as extreme liberal Europe. In Iran, extreme Muslim. I won't call it Muslim, but their own version of Islam, whatever they think is Islam, because Islam exists in different shapes and sizes and forms, as we all agree to that. So Iran's extreme control is putting people on the verge that we can't live under this system. And also, if you look at the history of Iran, Iran was a very liberal place.
Right.
When this Islamic regime or this mullahs, I would call it, took over. Before that, Iran was a place for Westerners to go and enjoy. And, it was I won't say it was as liberal as Europe, but there was moderate liberalism, which is good for a society. I believe in that.
So I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying, that Iran kind of like reach the logical conclusion of where it can go. So I would say a lot of ideologies are a lot more powerful when they're kind of promising a future that isn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a religious country, secularism as it is at its most powerful, because it can say, if only we were secular, all of our problems would be solved, which the West kind of went through in the sort of mid 2000s, where the new atheism was this kind of big deal. It's like, all right, once we get rid of religion, we're going to be in the space age. And that didn't work at all. And with Iran, the whole premise is, if we have a proper Shia state governed by the proper successors, the Ayatollah, the verse of God ruling people, then we'll have a just and successful.
But you failed to deliver.
Right, exactly.
That's why people are leaving.
And there's nowhere else to go now.
Yes.
Because the people they claim are God's representative on earth are currently ruling that, and there's nowhere else to go. And the only thing they can do is blame outsiders on their problems, right? Well, okay, we would be fine if it wasn't for the great Satan and the little Satan.
Yeah, again, looking at Iran's situation, a regime came in, promised certain things, and those things didn't happen. And on top of that, you use religion card. So people started believing, and that is connected to why a lot of Iranians are coming to Christ, right? It is embedded in that, okay, these people represent Islam. And at the end of the day, if Islam cannot solve our problems, it means there is a problem in Islam.
Yeah, well, I also think it's more than that. I mean, I think that it's repressing them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just like it's not effective solution. Um, I think that might have been the case in the West, right? Like the religious solutions are not effective solutions, so let's turn to something else. But I think once you start, like putting people in a state of repression the way that state does in particular, right? Um, and cracking down on certain things. Like there's no free speech, right? It's more, and it just goes to more than free speech. Like you can't dress the way you want. You can't,
You can't say certain things.
you can't say certain things, right? And then on top of that, the state even goes a step further and picks winners and losers, right? So it's not like it's like a pure capitalist state where you can walk in and you can say, oh, my product is the best product, so therefore I get to be a millionaire, right? Like that has to be, that it all runs through the state, and the state will take something away from you if you're not a good Muslim, right? Like, so they'll take a job away from you. They'll take a career away from you. They have to approve of you. So I think that in repressive places is where Christianity thrives.
So here's where I want to bring this conversation to, is that in different places in different times, some ideas are on the rise, some ideas are on the decline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a human impulse where if you feel like what you believe is on the rise, it makes you feel like it's true. But lots of people believing in something
means
nothing, right? We all, every single person who's ever existed realizes this to some capacity.
Yeah.
We all like to feel like we're on the winning team. We all like to feel like we're making the right choices. I think, from a Christian standpoint, I would say, well, thank God for God, right? Because the idea in Christianity is that the Holy Spirit will convict you of sin, and you can harden your heart to that. But, looking at the world through a Christian lens makes you less likely, for instance, to look at a political solution, right? It makes you more likely to wait for, Jesus to step in.
So I have a suspicion here, and see what you guys think of this, is that Sunni Islam is especially susceptible to these arguments because there is so much emphasis placed on the majority in there. So there's a hadith in Al-Tirmidhi.
Al-Tirmidhi.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Where it says
Al-Tirmidhi.
where the hadith says that Allah will never cause his ummah to agree on an error, and Allah's hand is over the jamia, and whoever or the group, and whoever deviates to hell.
Yes, I mean, this goes back to what we talked about, fitna al-Khawarij, the Khawarij concept. If majority is on one side, even though, in my opinion, Kharijites were not wrong. When they just slid away from the main branch, they were not wrong about their beliefs. They said we don't want this family legacy of taking over the power. We want that the power belongs to God alone, and He's the one who decided. I'm not going into details of what exactly that was, but again, it does solidify this point in Islam that majority is authority, and a lot of people in modern day is pointing this to the democracy, that democracy is actually derived from Islam, because Islam talks about majority. So
hold on, I think I just sprained my eye.
And then but this is it. The idea of the majority is powerful in especially the Sunni mindset, because the Shia mindset, they haven't been the majority. So
yes, and their belief is scholars or the alims or ulamas or the walayas is from Ali's lineage. So if doesn't matter how righteous you are, if you don't belong to that family tree, you're not capable or eligible for that.
So I would make the argument, and tell me if you think this is fair, that Sunni Islam tends to kind of build in the psychology that if you're deviating from the group, you're in danger.
definitely in danger. Yes.
So conversely, Jesus says, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. So it's actually flipped to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, like, you shall not run with a multitude to do evil, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
There's this constant skepticism of the crowd
right.
in the Bible, which I think there's something built in there which says if everybody's doing something, there's almost like this pause and be like, well, I could be in danger if I'm doing exactly the same thing everyone else is doing. Then it's time to stop and take a pulse and see what's going on.
I mean, Islam definitely redirects you. So Sunni Islam definitely redirects you to the crowd, right? But I think Christianity definitely, and I mean, I'm not trying to like denigrate any Muslims by saying this. It's just in the text, right? Like, it acknowledges the crowd. I mean, if you're looking at the whole of Scripture, right, it acknowledges the crowd, but then it has to point you back to God as an individual and not as a group.
Yeah, and I mean, like, let me just rephrase those words. Use the crowd. I would say unity. Islam focuses is attention on that. And in Quran, it's clearly mentioned.
Christianity does.
Yeah, and it's like hold to the rope of God tightly.
Right.
And wala tafarraku, and do not have segregations in between. Right. So unite together.
Sure.
That kind of like that was my question. If that text is prompting us to be unique from the crowd or a little different from the crowd, how we address the sense of unity here then?
Yeah, so basically the unity is important, but there's no sense of being different from the crowd just for the sake of being different from the crowd.
Right.
What it's teaching is that if you actually do what it means to follow God, which means to trust him and to seek to live by his way, you will be different from the crowd and you won't get absorbed into things.
Yeah, right. Just to put that in more clear words, I mean, like in my own clear words, that if a group is following a wrong thing and there is 1,000 people walking on that path, and if you feel that this is not according to what God told us, then you can walk alone on that path and God will be with you.
Two things. Okay. First of all, the way that the Bible, the New Testament in particular, and the writings of Paul talk about individuality and then unity in the midst of that individuality, it talks about it in terms of the Bible, right? Like, can a hand be a foot? You know, can an eye be an ear, right? Like, we're all part of a body, but we all serve a unique purpose within the body. And it highlights that. And then as far as what you're saying, right, which I'm not necessarily aware. I'm aware of this in Islamic history. I'm not necessarily aware of it during the time of Muhammad. At the beginning of the book of Revelation, Jesus literally points at 7 churches and says, you're messing up. You're doing it wrong. You know what I mean? Like, he highlights these errors that they're doing and calls them to come back to him.
Except you, Zoidberg. You've been good.
Yeah, right. So he points at these different places. He's like, you lost your first love. You've allowed sexual immorality to come into your midst. You guys love the world too much, right? And he's calling them back to himself. So the correction is coming directly from God, right? Like, it's not coming from necessarily the group, because the group, God himself is saying, like, that group is flawed, right? It's not that the group is not, the ummah is impervious to making a mistake because Allah will never allow it, right? It's this group here has this thing and it needs to change in order to be right with me, right? So I think that there's a huge contrast in the midst of that when you're trying to navigate both religions as a follower. Okay. Like, what does God think of me is, I think, a question in both religions. Like, where do I stand with God? Whatever. Right. But the prescription for how that is interpreted is different. and how that individual kind of like acts on those things is an important like factor. So when I was a Muslim, my questions about Islam were directed where I went to my father, right? I didn't go to the Quran. I went to my father, and my father would go to his sources, and then my mother, right? If she had questions about Islam, she would go to my father. You know what I mean? But we're, as Christians, we're supposed to go to the Bible. You know what I mean? And then we're supposed to, like, it says that there are these people called the Bereans in the New Testament in the book of Acts, and that they searched the scriptures every day to see that the things that Paul was saying were true, right? Like they went into the Bible and they went into the text and they studied it.
I mean, sorry to interrupt you, and I think there is one point that is important to make here. That Islam doesn't stop you from reading Quran and
Right.
yourself
I know it
understanding.
doesn't. Yeah.
You know, you can directly go to
I'm just saying that my experience is that, like, you've read it,
Yes.
right? Like, I know I've met people who have read it, but I've met a lot more people who haven't read it.
There's also-
there's a lot of
and there's a lot of guardrails on it too. So, for example, with that hadith I was talking about, whoever diverged from the Jamia
yes.
diverged to hell. A lot of scholars will say that Jamia doesn't refer to the crowd as a whole, but the consensus of the scholars.
Yes, Ijma al-Ummah.
Ijma al-Ulama, right?
Yes.
So that's a big deal. And so there's a certain sense where in the Islamic world, it's not that any Muslim is going to say you should do the wrong thing even because everyone else is doing it. No one's going to say that.
Mhm.
But there is a built-in cultural expectation that the group will be rightly guided, and the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets.
Yeah.
In the Bible, there is an inbuilt skepticism to the crowd, and to a certain extent, an inbuilt mechanism that you, the individual, need to always be examining everything you're hearing according to Scripture, even the words of your own leaders.
And not just that, like you're right, your motives, your intentions, your sinful inclination.
Yes, of course.
Versus the will of God.
Examining yourself before examining anyone else. Guys, thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We will be back next week.